A phone call, a promise to be home for dinner, a brief stop at an ex-boyfriend's house, and then nothing. Not a trace. Not a goodbye. She vanished on a warm July evening in 1999 and wasn't seen again for 25 years. Not until they found her bones, scattered and incomplete. This isn't just a cold case. It's a ghost that never stopped haunting. It's the kind of story that reminds you how someone can disappear in a blink, and how justice, no matter how late, can still claw its way out of the grave. Welcome back to True Crimes Ratels. Tonight, we're digging into the disappearance and eventual discovery of 34-year-old Kimberly Langwell. A single mother, a loyal friend, a woman with dreams who simply disappeared after work. One minute she was calling her daughter to say she'd be home soon. The next, she was gone, and her loved ones were left to scream into silence for the next 2.5 decades. This case is brutal, not because of gore or headlines, but because of what it exposes, how easily a life can vanish when the cameras turn away. No media frenzy, no national outcry, no name on every news ticker. Just one grieving daughter, and a truth no one wanted to face. So if you've ever wondered what happens when time forgets a missing person, when families are left to beg for answers in the shadows, then this is the story you need to hear. Before we dive in, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. We tell the stories others leave behind, and your support helps bring them back into the light. And as you watch, tell us in the comments, do you believe justice can still be justice when it comes 25 years too late? Now, let's talk about Kimberly. Born in February 1965, Kimberly Langwell lived in Beaumont, Texas, just east of Houston. By the time she was 18, she was already a mother, raising her daughter Tiffany on her own. Life wasn't easy, but Kimberly never let that define her. She worked double shifts, took weekend jobs, anything to build a future for her and her child. She was known for her softness, her persistence, and her resilience. Her life had its ups and downs, like anyone's. She'd been in a few relationships over the years, but nothing ever really stuck, until Ken Weatherford. Ken was different. At least that's how it seemed. Kimberly's friends noticed she was acting more serious about him, wearing what looked like a faux engagement ring. They'd even taken a trip to Mexico together. And most telling of all, Ken had a good relationship with her daughter. That alone made him stand out from the others. But in the background, there was another man, Terry Rose. He was the ex, the one she had broken things off with about 6 months before her disappearance. Kimberly had told friends it was over. But sometimes when something ends, it doesn't stay buried. On Friday, July 9th, 1999, Kimberly finished her shift at the local oil refinery. She clocked out around 5 p.m. and called Tiffany just 15 minutes later. They had dinner plans. Ken was supposed to join them. It was going to be a simple, quiet night at home. But Kimberly never showed. Before heading home, she told Tiffany she needed to make a quick stop, just for a few minutes. She was going to Terry Rose's place. She said it wouldn't take long. She never made it home. What happened next remains one of Beaumont's most disturbing mysteries. No struggle, no clear sign of foul play. Just a missing woman and a trail that turned ice cold almost immediately. For 25 years, there were no solid leads, no breakthroughs, no closure. Until now. Just weeks ago, human remains were found, and after DNA testing, it was confirmed. Kimberly Langwell had finally been found. But her remains weren't complete. So now the question becomes, what really happened that night? Why did Kimberly go to Terry's house? And what did she walk into that cost her everything? This story isn't just about loss. It's about how jealousy festers in silence, how time can't always erase guilt, and how the past doesn't stay buried forever. So stay with us, because what was hidden for 25 years is finally seeing the light, and the truth is far darker than anyone imagined. By 6:30 p.m. that Friday evening, Kimberly's boyfriend, Ken Weatherford, was waiting at home with her daughter Tiffany. The plan was simple dinner together, just the three of them. But time kept moving. and Kimberly didn't walk through the door. At first, it was just a few minutes, then a half hour, then an hour. They both started calling her phone over and over, straight to voicemail, no reply. Kimberly wasn't the type to vanish without notice, especially not when her daughter was expecting her. And that silence, it didn't sit right. Eventually, Tiffany did what any worried daughter would do. She reached out to the last person she knew her mother planned to see, Terry Rose, Kimberly's ex-boyfriend. Now, what Terry said should have been reassuring. He told Tiffany that Kimberly had already left, but instead of sounding concerned that she hadn't made it home, his tone shifted in a way that still sends chills. He got defensive, then aggressive. He didn't ask if Kimberly was okay. He didn't ask if they needed help. Instead, he got angry and snapped at Tiffany, asking why he wasn't invited to dinner. That was his focus. Not the fact that Kimberly hadn't come home. Not the fact that a teenage girl was calling him in panic. Just bitterness, resentment, entitlement. Something was off, and Ken and Tiffany could feel it in their gut. But still, they waited. Maybe Kimberly had an unexpected errand. Maybe her phone died. Maybe something came up. They clung to hope that any moment now, she'd walk through the door like nothing happened. But by 1 a.m., there was still no sign of her. That's when Ken decided to start looking. Tiffany stayed home just in case her mother returned. Ken jumped in his car and started driving, scanning bars, gas stations, grocery store parking lots, every place Kimberly might have gone on a whim. And then, around 10:30 p.m., he spotted it, her silver 1994 Nissan Altima, sitting alone in a nearly empty shopping center off Dahlen and Fane Road, right outside an Eckerd drugstore. The car wasn't hidden. It wasn't parked in a strange way. It was just sitting there, in plain sight, alone, as if abandoned. Ken looked inside. No sign of Kimberly, no damage, no struggle, nothing obviously wrong. But it still didn't make sense. That location was way off her usual route home. She had no reason to be there. It wasn't near Terry's house, her job, or anything in between. So Ken tried to make sense of it. Maybe she got picked up by a friend. Maybe she changed her plans last minute. But none of that felt like Kimberly, and in the back of his mind, he knew it. The next morning, around 8 a.m., Ken returned to the same parking lot. He was hoping, praying that the car would be gone, that Kimberly had come back for it, that this whole thing was just a misunderstanding. But the car was still there. That's when they called police. By now, more than 14 hours had passed since Kimberly was last heard from. This was no longer just a delay. It was a disappearance. Beaumont police arrived at the scene and examined the car. Still, no signs of foul play. The vehicle was locked, untouched. But something did stand out. Her purse and car keys were missing, but oddly, her cell phone and makeup bag were still inside. If she'd just gone somewhere, why leave those behind? If she'd been abducted, why take the purse but not the phone? The puzzle pieces didn't fit, and the more they tried to make it make sense, the darker the picture became. Even more suspicious, the shopping center was nowhere near where she should have been. And when police reviewed surveillance footage from nearby stores, Kimberly never showed up on any camera. No footage of her entering or leaving any business. And nobody, not friends, not coworkers, not neighbors, had heard from her since she called Tiffany the day before. Her bank accounts were untouched. No calls, no messages, nothing. Her daughter knew it. Her family knew it. Her friends knew it. Something had happened to Kimberly. Something violent. Something final. Her entire world revolved around Tiffany. She would never walk away voluntarily. She would never ghost her daughter. If Kimberly was gone, someone had taken her. And there were suspects. Not just one, but multiple men, each with dark obsessions and ugly histories. First, there was Terry Rose, the man she'd stopped by to see just before she disappeared. To call their relationship rocky would be an understatement. Kimberly's friends and family had long been uncomfortable with him. Terry was described as controlling, possessive, and increasingly aggressive. At first, he'd come across as charming, successful even, owning a record business. But that image faded quickly. He would call constantly, interrogating Kimberly about her whereabouts, demanding answers. Her friends had overheard the conversations. They saw how uncomfortable she was. He wanted control over her time, her choices, her life. Tiffany, her daughter, said she never liked Terry. Her instincts were sharp and she had reason to worry. Because just months before Kimberly vanished, things had taken a terrifying turn. She confided in a close family friend, someone she trusted, that Terry had once tried to strangle her. She said she blacked out, that in that moment, she truly thought she was going to die. She survived, but barely. And even after that, he didn't stop. When she tried to leave, he threatened her. He blocked the door. He said if she left him or got involved with another man, he'd kill her. Kimberly tried to stay calm. She told people that if anything ever happened to her, look at Terry. She even said if anyone tried to say she took her own life, don't believe it. She feared for her life and for her daughter's safety. And here's where it gets even darker. Even after she ended the relationship, Terry continued manipulating her through money, favors, and control. He kept her on a phone plan under his name. He'd pay random bills to stay relevant. He'd give her cash and hold it over her. His claws were still in her, even from a distance. She thought if she stayed polite, kept him at arm's length, maybe he'd finally let her go. He didn't. Naturally, police brought him in for questioning. Terry admitted their relationship had ended 6 months earlier, and even confessed it had gotten physical, saying he once slapped her. But he denied having anything to do with her disappearance. He claimed Kimberly had stopped by that day to help him with a home renovation project. Said she was there for 15-20 minutes, holding up boards while he drilled them into the wall. Then she left, and he said he stayed home alone until 9:30 p.m., after which he went to a pool hall called the Corner Pocket. Problem is, that's not a solid alibi. No one could confirm where he was during those crucial hours. Police searched his home and his record business, which shared the same property. They found nothing obvious, no blood, no sign of Kimberly, no definitive evidence. Still, everything about his behavior screamed something was wrong. But Terry wasn't the only threat in Kimberly's life. There was another man, Frank McCormick, her boss, a married man, and a man who, like Terry, was obsessed with her. And Frank began flirting with Kimberly at work. Then came the love letters, dozens of them. Long, emotional, manipulative letters where he poured out his feelings and pressured her to reciprocate. Kimberly knew she was walking a dangerous line. He was her supervisor. He had power over her job. So every time he gave her a letter, she handed it off to a trusted friend to protect herself. She saved everything in case she needed proof. And what the letters revealed was disturbing. Frank offered to take her and Tiffany to Europe. He said he couldn't live without her, that she was his salvation. He wrote about driving past her house 20 to 30 times a week, stalking her, fantasizing, obsessing. And if she didn't respond, he guilted her, blamed her, told her she just didn't understand how deep his feelings ran. And get this, Frank even said he had a whole file of unsent letters, hundreds of pages he never had the nerve to give her. This wasn't just inappropriate, it was dangerous. Could she have rejected him? Threatened to expose him? Was he desperate to protect his reputation, his marriage, his career? When police questioned Frank, he tried to downplay everything, said he had a small crush, never mentioned the letters, never brought up the gifts or the stalking. But unlike Terry, Frank had something resembling an alibi. He showed police a grocery store receipt time-stamped at 6:56 p.m., not long after Kimberly vanished. He said he was prepping for a poker night with 8 friends, all of whom confirmed the story. It wasn't airtight, but it held for now. And still, the deeper investigators dug, the more it all kept circling back to one name: Terry. When Kimberly's sister went to his home after she was officially reported missing, he didn't express concern. He didn't ask questions. He said, "Good. Now you know how I feel." That was his response. He also mentioned giving Kimberly $500 for a trip to Mexico, a trip she ended up taking with her new boyfriend, Ken. That clearly burned him. And now she was missing. Witnesses saw Kimberly's car at Terry's home around 5:50 p.m. By 6:20, it was gone. Then at 6:45 p.m., a witness saw Terry's tow truck in the same shopping center where her car was found. And that pool hall he claimed to go to later that night, it was in that same shopping center. Coincidence? Maybe. But combined with his history, his threats, and his behavior, it's hard to believe Kimberly just disappeared on her own. But with no physical evidence, no confession, and no witness willing to testify to more, the case went cold. And for 25 years, it stayed that way. After years of agonizing silence, the Beaumont police finally made it official. They believed Kimberly Langwell had been the victim of foul play, and at that point, they were no longer working under the assumption that she was simply missing. They feared the worst, that she was gone forever. But without a body or a smoking gun, they were stuck. Investigators knew they needed something concrete, something undeniable to push the case forward. So for years, Kimberly's loved ones did the only thing they could. They kept fighting. They kept hoping. They refused to let her memory fade. And in the shadows, Terry Rose, the man many suspected from the beginning, didn't disappear quietly. No, according to Kimberly's sister, he continued to haunt the family in the most chilling ways. Right after Kimberly vanished, he called them, not to offer condolences, not to ask how they were holding up, but to inform them almost casually that he was about to take a polygraph test. No one asked him. No one even mentioned it. But he volunteered that information anyway. And even more disturbingly, he added that he knew he was going to fail it. Then, silence. No explanation. Just that cryptic comment, like he wanted them to know something dark without giving them the satisfaction of answers. But he didn't stop there. Months into the investigation, Terry picked up the phone again and called the family just to ask if they'd heard from Kim lately, as if she hadn't been missing. As if the woman believed to have been murdered wasn't at the center of a growing investigation. And then, almost like clockwork, the prank calls started. Random, silent phone calls, no one on the other end. Just static, breathing, dead air. And they kept coming. For 2 full years. It wasn't until one of those calls was disrupted by the sound of a police scanner in the background that the family began to suspect something. You see, Terry ran a wrecking service. He had access to a scanner like that. And from that point on, the calls suddenly stopped. But his cruelty didn't end there. In 2002, 3 years after Kimberly's disappearance, Terry ran into Tiffany, Kimberly's daughter, in public. And instead of leaving her alone, he approached her, asking personal questions about her mother. When Kimberly's sister confronted him, told him to stay away from Tiffany, Terry didn't apologize. He didn't show an ounce of remorse. Instead, he smirked and said, "Want to know what polygraph question I failed?" Then he told her it was the question, "Did you kill Kimberly?" It was taunting. It was twisted. And it was pure evil. Kimberly's family tried everything. Her brother even created a personal database to track patterns and search for anything that might lead to answers. Tiffany, meanwhile, tried to move forward with her life. She got married, moved away, but the wound was always there. People would ask about her mother, and she eventually started telling them her mom had died years ago, just to avoid the pity, the whispers, the questions. This is why victim advocacy matters, because it's not just the victim who suffers, it's the families left behind, trying to survive the trauma of not knowing. The pain of being haunted by memories and what-ifs for decades. Years passed. Nothing changed. Then, 8 years after Kimberly disappeared, investigators decided to take a fresh look. They re-interviewed people, reviewed old leads, hoped something new might surface. Still, no breakthrough. A woman named Dee Dee Keene, a survivor of 2 abductions herself, stepped in to help. Every year on the anniversary of Kimberly's disappearance, she would stand at the corner where Kimberly's car was found, handing out flyers, refusing to let the world forget. But time kept moving, and Kimberly was still missing. Then, April 2024 changed everything. That month, the team from Cold Justice aired an episode about Kimberly's case, and it lit a fire. A handful of investigators in Beaumont had never given up on finding Kimberly, but now they had momentum, media attention, and maybe the last push they needed. Together with prosecutor Kelly Siegler, they reopened the case in full, and they circled back to the two names that had haunted this case from the start: Frank and Terry. Frank, Kimberly's former boss, who had flooded her with obsessive love letters, voluntarily came in for questioning. Even after 25 years, he agreed to talk. He still downplayed the relationship, acting like it wasn't serious. He seemed surprised when they brought up the dozens of letters he had written, all of which Kimberly had saved. But in the end, Frank didn't seem to be hiding anything. Terry, on the other hand, was a whole different story. For over 2 decades, he had refused to speak to investigators. But this time, they weren't asking. They showed up at his house. And what did Terry do? He ran, slipped out the back door, cut across his property, hopped into a beat-up car near his wrecking yard, and tried to bolt. But police intercepted him, and when confronted, Terry suddenly changed his tune, acting like it was all a misunderstanding. He looked them in the face and said, "Oh, I didn't see you." But the officers weren't buying it. They'd watched him look directly at them as he ran. Still, they pressed on, tried to keep the tone neutral, gave him a chance to speak. But his answers, or rather, his lies, told them everything they needed to know. He claimed Kimberly was totally fine the last time he saw her, that she came over to pick up some things she left behind, that she was calm, happy, totally normal. He insisted that after their breakup, he gave her space, which went completely against everything the family and friends had reported about his obsessive behavior. And here's where it gets even more suspicious. He changed his story. Originally, he said Kimberly came over to help him hang some boards, but now, suddenly, she reached out to him because she left something behind. A total contradiction. What Terry didn't realize was that Kimberly had actually told someone what happened. She had called a close family friend the day she went missing and said Terry had called her, claiming she left valuable jewelry at his house. That friend begged her not to go, begged her, told her, "I'll buy you new jewelry, just don't go." But Kimberly was determined. She thought she'd be safe. After all, nothing had happened in months. She was wrong. After Cold Justice aired the episode, the local district attorney decided it was time. They launched a grand jury investigation, aiming to finally charge Terry Rose with Kimberly's murder, even without a body. They knew he was hiding something. They just needed one final piece of the puzzle. And then, like a twist in a movie, that piece arrived. In April 2024, an informant came forward. And what they revealed? It was explosive. According to this informant, Terry Rose had confessed to killing Kimberly Langwell right there in his home back in 1999. Not only that, but he told them he had buried her body on his property. That was it. That was what they needed. On June 10th, 2024, the Beaumont Police Department secured a warrant to search Terry's home on Lindbergh Drive. Multiple agencies joined the effort: the FBI, ATF, Texas EquuSearch, even the Public Works Department. They brought in ground-penetrating radar. They were going to find Kimberly. Days passed as they combed through the property. Then, on June 13th, they found something. The radar showed an anomaly beneath the concrete floor of one of the bedrooms, an area roughly the size of a human body, with no rebar reinforcing the slab. It had been cut out. Tim Miller of Texas EquuSearch said what everyone else was thinking. It's the perfect size for someone to be buried. City crews moved in. They carefully cut away the concrete. Then hand by hand, investigators began digging. And by 3 a.m., they found her, wrapped in a blanket, buried beneath the very home where Terry had lived for 25 years. All that time, she was there. The search was over. That same day at 6:15 p.m., Terry Rose was arrested for the murder of Kimberly Langwell. Footage shows him being led in handcuffs down the stairs at the police department, silent, stone-faced. He said nothing, offered no explanation, no remorse. And honestly, no one expected him to. At the press conference that followed, officers, detectives, volunteers, all the people who never gave up, finally got to say the words they'd waited decades to speak. They found her. They brought her home. Kimberly's daughter, Tiffany, now an adult, said it best. "It's not the way I wanted her back, But at least now she's not being held anymore. She was only 15 years old when her mother vanished. For 25 years, she carried that weight. And now she can finally lay her to rest with dignity. It's heartbreaking to think about. Kimberly was supposed to see Tiffany go to prom, watch her grow up, maybe even marry Ken, the man who truly seemed to love her. But all of that was stolen by a man who wanted control more than anything else. DNA results later confirmed what everyone already knew: the remains belonged to Kimberly Langwell. Terry Rose is currently sitting in jail on a $1 million bond. If he somehow makes bail, which seems unlikely, he'll be required to wear an ankle monitor and won't be allowed to leave the county. There's still no word yet on whether he'll plead guilty or take this to trial. But if it does go to trial, I hope he's forced to sit there and listen. I hope he hears every word: how he hurt a family, how he tore apart a community, and how he didn't get away with it after all. Because for 25 years, Terry thought he was clever, that he'd buried the truth. But the truth has a way of rising to the surface, and now he's going to answer for it. As Officer Carol Riley said, this case is proof. To anyone out there thinking they got away with something, we're still digging, and we're not stopping. Here at True Crimes Ratels, we believe that every story matters, even the ones that go quiet for decades. So if you're able, please consider donating to the Cold Case Foundation. They are the reason stories like Kimberly's finally get justice. Thank you for watching, and thank you for standing with us and with Kimberly. We will never stop telling these stories. We will never stop digging for the truth. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.